Eustass Kid or useless mid? It's time to find out. Now, Kid is someone who gets a lot of shit within the community, and it's mainly due to the recent chapters with Shanks one-shotting the likes of Kid, even with his partner trying to intercept the attack for him. Kid gets knocked out regardless and is now presumed dead thanks to the giants from Little Garden. Since this chapter's release, Kid has been getting flack for being a fraud and fodder, but really before this moment, Kid was looked at as one of the most powerful characters in the series. Or at least one of the more powerful ones, probably not most. So today I will be analyzing all of his fights and determining whether or not Kid is mid, and with me today I have Talk to help me out. You know, like the law move.
Now, the first time that we see him is during Sabaody, when he's portrayed to be on the same caliber as Luffy and Law, taking out a bunch of fodder navy, and was shown to be grazed by a pacifista laser. We briefly see Kid's devil fruit, which allows him to manipulate metal and attract it to make constructs or take away weapons, but it also can be used to repel or deflect things like cannonballs. We don't really get to see the full extent of his abilities till Wano. Before we even speak about that, we gotta address what happens to Kid during the time skip. During time skip, he attempts to fight Shanks, which will lead him getting his arm removed by who we think is Ben Beckman. And after this, he would go on to get one shot and defeated by Kaido. After taking the L granted to him, we see Kid training with the likes of Luffy in the Udon prison, with Luffy getting stronger as the arc progresses and Kid somehow not falling completely behind. We even see Luffy, Kid, Law somewhat recreate what they did in Sabaody, being portrayed relative, and even go down to face both Kaido and Big Mom.
During the raid on Onigashima, we had Gear 4 Luffy, Kid, and Law all being somewhat comparable, which would at the very least mean Kid is slamming any opponent Luffy's fought before this point. This is due to base Luffy with advanced Haki surpassing his Gear 4 self that got completely one-shotted by Kaido, but then in Gear 4 isn't completely outclassing Kid, along with the others who are helping him on rooftop. That doesn't really happen until Luffy starts to somewhat lose, which forces him to adapt and bloom his Haki. Also, as a side note, although Kid probably would have gotten turned to atoms from this attack, besides Zoro, he was the only other person prepared to withstand the attack, which in my book gives him some bonus points. And if this wasn't enough for you, well, we do see him awaken his fruit against Big Mom and grow despite not being at 100% himself. Big Mom relied on getting an amp that put her at her peak in terms of power due to Law's fruit and Kid's raw power from his magnet constructs giving her such a hard time. We even see Kid's damned punk laser doing some solid damage against her, and he can even react to her at her best. Now, Kid obviously isn't Yonko level, but to say he's a fraud because Shanks one-shot him, when we see him fight a Yonko before this and do pretty okay, I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say. Now, I do believe Big Mom is weaker than Shanks, but probably not to the same degree as the majority of the community. People think because Shanks one-shot Kid that Shanks can do the same thing to Big Mom, but I do not think the gap between Yonkos is that big. And speaking of, let's discuss the fight that put Kid on Fraud Watch in the first place, that being Kid versus Shanks. Now, before Shanks used this attack, he saw into the future and saw essentially all of his men being wiped out by the damn punk laser, and Shanks would then go on to prevent this future by off-rip using an advanced Conqueror Slash before Kid can fire the laser, meaning he's not only taking Shanks' blast, but also the damage from attempting to generate the laser and the arm exploding in his face. Although we don't know if exactly Kid is dead or alive, what I do know is that people genuinely take this feat out of proportion to make Kid look bad.
Lastly, before we come to the conclusion on if he's a fraud, I like to address the whole Kid doesn't use Haki thing. Now, he doesn't have advanced conquerors just yet, but we do know that he is a user of it, which means that he's simply built different. Despite this, we see people amongst the community say that he'd even lose to characters like Sanji, since he doesn't rely on armament or observation. However, I feel like you could apply that to any other character, like King, Ben Beckman, even my GOAT Law, and say that, oh, he doesn't show it, so he's gotta be trash. This does not disregard his feats, and we can only assume he uses it in battle, but Oda doesn't really care to point out the details, or Kid is just more impressive since he can apply it.
In conclusion, Kid doesn't really do much until the Wano arc, and during this arc we see him not being too far behind from the likes of post-Udon training Luffy, and post-Awakening, Kid should be right next to Law, if not stronger than him when it comes to stats. I do think Law would beat him in a fight just because of his sheer versatility and them being very close in stats, But I think where Law makes up in versatility, Kid makes up for power. But I do think Kid simply hits harder than Law, which, if I'm gonna get jumped in the comments regardless because I make that statement, then oh well. Plus, his strongest attack can even have the Emperors of the World sweating. The community is just exaggerating what it actually is, and Kid is still a force to be reckoned with. Is he Shanks level? No. But that doesn't mean he's trash, and he would still slam King or Sanji on their necks.